Take this job and shove it.
This is Mike Baumgartner, and I am your work-life survival sage, and this is Jobcast Radio. If you've got a problem with your boss, if you've got a problem with your company, if you have lost your job, you do not know what to do, you need help with your resume, you need some advice on how to get a job, that is what we are here for. If you've got a problem at work, if you've got a problem with life, if you have a problem just being able to balance out your life and your work, things are going crazy, you got questions, you give me a call. It is 304-867-4142. Again, 304-867-4142. And you can call me anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I will make sure that we get you the answers that you need. You can also check out my website, Jobcastradio.com, where you will see not only my blog, my articles, and videos, all of which, by the way, are free, but also a great collection of articles, blog posts from other career experts that I partner with and network with, so we can get you the best information about what's going on in the real world, not what you're hearing from other resources. And it is a crazy labor market out there. Gallup is saying that our unemployment rate is over 10%. Now, that is non-seasonally adjusted numbers, because the government number says we are somewhere around 9%. I like the seasonally unadjusted numbers, because that actually is the truth of what's going on. Seasonally adjusted numbers tend to take things into account, like perhaps, the holidays, summer hiring and stuff like that. So they take all those numbers out. So if you're a temp individual or you're a part-timer, you get a job and then you lose your job, that kind of pulls out of it. But the true unemployed number is the unvarnished number, the unseasonally adjusted number. And right now I see that is somewhere around 10%, probably getting a little bit higher, as well as the underemployment number, which is those people who have taken temp jobs or part-time jobs because they haven't been able to find anything else, but they are still looking for work. Is well into 18%, creeping up to 20%. About 35,000 private sector jobs were created last month. Way too few to really have an impact, and we'll see how things go as companies begin to realize, what the year is happening, how the spending and the purchasing power of the American people is. And, I think we're turning it around a little bit. I'm not seeing any great encouragement, but you never know. Right now we have demonstrations in various states, some pro-union actions as the states are trying to recoup some of their losses by trying to get union workers to give up in concessions. As that kind of spreads around the country, you may be seeing a lot more unemployment. And a special message, and I am not anti-union, not pro-union either. It really depends upon the company and what the purpose of that union is for. I think that there are some people who have unionized who, quite frankly, look, unions were great when people were losing their hands and their lives in jobs because companies didn't care, and they paid you $0.25 per hour, and if you lost your hand, they just fired you because you couldn't do the job. That is when you needed labor protection. But there are groups out there right now, waiters and waitresses, nurses, and non-hazardous jobs that are unionizing because they get more power when they become a union. Look, I get that. I understand that. And if you're an employee and in a union and you get more money out of it, well, more power to you. But the problem is that when you end up in that kind of situation, when the employer turns around and says, okay, we need to cut you back, then you strike, and then we end up with these large demonstrations. And quite frankly, what's going to happen to those of you in unions who get to the point where you make zero concessions and the company is going broke or the state is going broke, the next step for the company is you're going to get laid off. And as I had said, go back to my shows back in 2009, 2010, when I said all these layoffs are happening, states and unions, you're next. You are now at that tipping point. You're at the point where you may find yourself out of a job because you didn't make any concessions, because you have a sweetheart deal on insurance and various other benefits. But we're not here to talk about unions. We are here to talk about the reality of life, and that is there's a lot of unemployed people out there. And unfortunately, I am seeing now that companies, and I have said this before, that as you are looking for a job and as you are unemployed, the longer you are unemployed, the harder it is going to be for you to get a job. I told you that was coming, and it looks like some other people are beginning to wake up to it. I'm referring to the Wall Street Journal, who this month penned an article about bias against the unemployed is now a subject of a probe. And what it's going, Dateline Washington, by Melanie Trotman. It says the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has begun a probe of whether employees in recruitment firms are unlawfully barring the unemployed from applying for certain jobs, the agency chairman said. EEOC Chairman Jacqueline Berrien said at a hearing Wednesday that the agency began hearing anecdotal reports of the practice last summer, including some news reports from worker advocacy groups gathering examples of help-wanted advertisements that say only individuals currently had jobs should apply. Now, I told you about this. I told you this was going to be happening. I told you last summer that companies are going to start hiring people who already have jobs, thinking that the people who survived the layoffs were the better employees. In some cases, that is extremely true, because people who get laid off, companies will tend to gerrymander their layoff list so that they get rid of the problem children. Not all of them. Sometimes you have departments, you have factories, you have entire buildings that shut down, and everybody loses a job. So not everybody who doesn't have a job is a bad worker. Some of them are, some of them are not. And companies are making the assumption that if you don't have a job or you didn't get one quickly, there's something wrong with you. And there is something very, very wrong with that assumption. But when you have 500 people applying for a job and you want to get picky, yeah, you're going to think that the people who have jobs might be a hair better than the people who don't. Going back to the article, quote, we'll take a close look at what we heard and consider if there is anything we might need to do to clarify standards, the EEOC chairman said. It isn't clear what the EEOC will do to address the issue or to what extent it is authorized to act. EEOC and Labor Department officials say they don't have much data on whether the practice of excluding unemployment from the applicant pool is widespread. Now, I don't know who they're talking to. I know for a fact this is a case, but then again, they're not asking me. Lawyers representing the employers say it isn't, and even when it is done, it can be justified based on an employer's need to hire and find workers whose skills are up to date. Now, what have I also been saying here on Jobcast Radio? Keep your skills up to date. Be apprised of everything that's going on. If you've been out of work for a year, companies are going to think you're outdated. Much as I also say, if you don't know what Twitter is, you don't know what Facebook is, if you're not involved in LinkedIn and various other social media things, they're going to think you're a dinosaur and you won't get the job. How many times do I have to say that? Anyway, going back. In one December Internet Help Wanted ad, a staffing company seeking paralegals stated that, quote, to be considered, candidates must be currently employed. The ad was submitted to the EEOC by the National Employment Law Project. Andrew Wang, the chief executive of the company, Beacon Hill Staffing Group, which is no schlub staffing organization in Boston, said Wednesday he wasn't really familiar with the ad. Quote, it is not our practice to limit our candidates to those that are currently employed. During the last 2 weeks, he said, nearly half of the candidates the agency placed into full-time positions had been unemployed. I believe that. Do I believe that the article exists? Oh, heck yeah. I see it all the time. Lawyers say no law explicitly bans a company from excluding applications from the unemployed. But, and here's the catch point, civil rights law does prohibit actions that put a group of applicants at a disadvantage based on race, gender, or age, unless an employer can show a business necessity for their decision. So what does that mean? Think about this. If there is no law, and there isn't, that says you have to be employed or unemployed, or it's discrimination that if I don't hire you because you were unemployed, if there is no other law, what other law can you go to? Civil rights laws. Why? Because certain populations in the United States have different unemployment rates. For example, the January unemployment rate for blacks was at 15.7%, nearly twice the rate, 8% for whites, according to data provided Wednesday by Aljamain Austin, director of the National Program on Race, Ethnicity, and the Economy for the Economic Policy Institute, a nonpartisan think tank. Unemployment rate for Hispanics, 11.9. Nation overall unemployment was at 9%. What does this mean? It means that black individuals, as a group, are significantly unemployed. So, if I am putting out an ad that says, I only want unemployed people, what you might be able to infer is that blacks, being a larger population, are being discriminated against by that ad. That is a lucid and fairly reasonable argument if you think about that. If more people who are black are unemployed and you say, I only want employed individuals, you have immediately changed your talent pool to what? Mostly white individuals. Think that through. It's a harsh reality, but that's the way it is. We'll be back.
Take this job and shut it.